I am chirurgeon interrogator Kalen Voss, Ordo Sepulturum, and my first recorded observation defies every law of physics I have sworn to uphold. The dead moon of Thessia 7 breathes. Through the armored viewport of our approach craft, I watch impossible condensation bead and roll across surfaces that should be frozen in the killing void, each droplet catching starlight like tears on a corpse's cheek. The atmospheric readings mock my instruments. 96% humidity rising steadily where no atmosphere should exist, warm moisture exhaling from barren rock into hard vacuum as if the moon itself possessed lungs. The sound reaches us through hull and void alike, a funeral bell tolling in 7-beat cadences that resonate in our bones, despite the absence of any medium to carry it. We have 23 minutes until descent, 7 hours until Navy quarantine protocols authorize cyclonic bombardment, and one impossible world that exhales incense and loam into the star-drunk darkness between worlds. The frost patterns spreading across our canopy arrange themselves in 7-pointed geometries, each crystalline formation nested within the next, like the prayers of some mad geometer. Confessor Matthias traces the air above them with a gloved finger, his voice carrying the steady rhythm of the litany of pure breath. 7 words, pause, 7 words. A shipboard habit among the void-born, meant to regulate breathing in recycled air. The irony cuts deep as I watch the frost bloom brighter with each recitation, as if our prayers feed whatever grows in that impossible garden below. My rebreather tastes of wet earth and funeral incense despite sealed atmospheric systems, and when I exhale, condensation forms inside my faceplate in 7 perfect droplets before vanishing like they were never there. Scion Squad Tertius occupies the transport's troop bay in parade formation, their Iotan dragon heraldry gleaming on carapace armor blessed against corruption. Gunnery Sergeant Hale's voice carries ground glass authority over the squad channel, his men responding with clicks and binary-counted checks they learned in training but don't truly understand. These are soldiers who have fought in the deep places where reality grows thin, veterans of 3 chaos incursions and 2 Tyrannid containment operations. If something on Thessia 7 requires killing, they will kill it with professional efficiency. Above us, through us, a subsonic thrumming threads the hull. 7 beats, then pause, a rhythm that pulls our breathing into synchronization whether we will it or not. I mark the compulsion and recite counter-litanies silently, inhaling on the Emperor's name, exhaling on the throne's glory, refusing to give my breath to anything else. Magos Errant Theta 7 exists among us only as burst packet transmissions and the whisper of blessed machinery, his physical form safely aboard the strike cruiser Penance of Dawn in high orbit. His voice arrives in clipped binary, mathematical precision wrapped in devotional cant that makes Matthias flinch at its alien cadences. Surface returns indicate polysaccharide matrices and lipid phase transitions in vacuum, the tech priest reports, his words carrying the weight of forbidden knowledge. Terminology: meat forest, hypothesis, mechano-spiritual error, caution advised, contamination by meaning detected in archived data streams. He transmits grainy pict captures of what our Auspex calls canopy, horizon-spanning swells of dark green shot through with pallid arterial networks that pulse in time with that impossible bell. The transport St. Ossuary creaks around us like old bones settling, her machine spirit disturbed by readings that contradict the Omnissiah's sacred laws. Through the forward observation dome, Thessia 7's night side glows with bioluminescent veins that shouldn't exist, organic light pulsing through what should be lifeless stone. I taste loam on my tongue through seals that should prevent any atmospheric exchange, smell rain-soaked earth where there should be only the metallic tang of recycled air. A bead of moisture rolls upward along my left lens, as if gravity has forgotten its proper direction, and when I curse softly at the impossibility, Hale's steady voice reminds me that all filters check green. They do. Emperor preserve us. They do. The LiDAR paints impossible topography across my tactical display. Ridges that pulse like arterial walls, valleys that dilate and contract in 7-beat rhythms, and towering structures that might once have been Mechanicus spires, but now resemble something between architecture and anatomy. The docking facility registers on our approach vector, a standard imperial umbilicus extending from what appears to be a landing platform, covered in organic matter, arranged in distinctly artificial patterns. As our craft settles into final approach, I watch the platform's surface flex and contract like a throat preparing to swallow, the connection sealing with a wet, organic sound that penetrates our hull despite the vacuum beyond. My Auspex chirps with readings that make my blood run cold. A single massive heartbeat detected in the moon's geological core, its rhythm matching the 7-beat pattern that has haunted us since entering this cursed system. The seismic sensors paint a picture of something vast and patient stirring in the depths, something that has learned to breathe in the void and exhale impossible atmospheres into hard vacuum. Sergeant Corvin's voice crackles over the vox with professional calm, barely masking underlying tension. Approaching docking sequence. Atmospheric composition reads as breathable. Recommend maintaining environmental seals until contamination protocols are complete. The umbilicus extends toward our craft with predatory patience, its corrugated surface lined with something that gleams like wet wax in our spot lamps. When the connection engages, I feel the smallest give, as if we have pressed against skin that yields reluctantly to our intrusion. The docking clamps extend with mechanical precision, but their engagement produces not the familiar clang of metal on metal, but something softer, more organic, the sound of flesh accepting foreign matter. The St. Ossuary's blessed machine spirit complains through my neural interface about poor fits and misaligned seals, about something in the connection that violates her sacred geometry. As the atmospheric systems equalize with whatever breathes beyond our hull, the funeral bell tolls again with the deep resonance of bronze and bone. The umbilicus shudders around us, flexing like a living throat, and somewhere in the green-lit depths of that impossible garden, I hear voices singing fragments of the litany of pure breath in 7-word phrases that echo through vacuum itself. The docking collar contracts one final time, drawing us inexorably into whatever nightmare has learned to grow in the spaces between stars, and I know with absolute certainty that we are no longer the hunters in this equation. The atmospheric seal completes with a wet, organic sound that penetrates our sealed helmets, a sound like lips parting reluctantly around a secret. I step through the umbilical into air that should not exist, breathing vacuum-borne atmosphere that tastes of rain on poisoned soil, despite my rebreather's sealed systems. The corridor stretches ahead in regulation imperial dimensions, but its walls pulse with visible circulatory networks, carrying luminescent fluid in the same 7-beat rhythm that has haunted us since entering this cursed system. My boots sink slightly into what appears to be standard decking, but the surface yields with organic compliance, and when I lift my foot, the impression fills slowly like healing flesh. Sergeant Hale's squad deploys with textbook precision, their movements crisp despite the unsettling give of the flooring beneath their boots. "Perimeter secure, sir," Hale reports through the vox, but his voice carries an edge I've never heard before, the sound of a man whose instruments tell him everything is normal while his instincts scream warnings. The humidity readings spike impossibly on my display, 98%, and climbing in what should be hard vacuum, and when I exhale, condensation forms inside my faceplate in 7 perfect droplets before vanishing like they were never there. The corridor's aquila reliefs have been transformed into something that maintains imperial symbolism while corrupting its meaning entirely. What should be the Emperor's sacred dual-headed eagle now spreads wings of bone and sinew, the beaks opened in silent screams that weep luminescent tears down walls lined with human hair woven into decorative patterns. Each strand moves with independent life, swaying in atmospheric currents that follow the 7-beat pattern, and when Confessor Matthias traces the sign of the aquila over his chest, the wall-mounted eagles seem to track his movement with eyeless sockets that nonetheless convey attention. My Auspex chirps with readings that make my blood run cold, multiple biological signatures ahead, arranged in perfect geometric formations, heartbeats synchronized to that impossible rhythm pulsing from the moon's core. The signatures don't move like living humans should. They remain stationary in patterns that suggest cultivation rather than habitation. Magos errant. Theta 7's voice crackles through the vox, with binary cant that tastes of machine oil prayers. Biosignature analysis indicates human derivative organisms in modified suspension. Atmospheric particulate density exceeding filtration parameters. Recommend immediate withdrawal. But withdrawal isn't an option. Not with 4 hours and 37 minutes until orbital bombardment. Not when 14 other facilities across the sector might be undergoing similar transformations. I advance deeper into the facility, following corridors that branch according to standard Mechanicus architectural principles, but whose walls breathe with patient rhythm. The bioluminescent networks cast everything in sickly green light that makes our helmet lamps seem pale and ineffective. And when Trooper Caney sweeps his luminator across the ceiling, the beam reveals not the expected cable runs, but something that resembles a vast nervous system, synaptic clusters pulsing with each beat of that impossible heart. The first contamination occurs without warning. As we round a bend in the corridor, Private Alara's boot catches on something that looks like standard mesh grating, but yields like cartilage under pressure. She stumbles, her rebreather scraping against what appears to be a bulkhead junction, and the sound produces a soft sigh from somewhere in the organic infrastructure. Before anyone can react, a grotesque bloom erupts from the mesh, a small, pinkish lobe that expands rapidly, pushing against her filters. It's unmistakably a human lung, perfectly formed and inflating with mechanical precision, and from its surface emerge whispered fragments of the litany of pure breath, spoken in 7-word phrases. Breathe steady, count blessings, exhale the fear. Hale moves to assist, but I raise a hand to halt his advance. The lung isn't attacking, it's breathing for her, through her, its rhythm perfectly synchronized with the facility's heartbeat. Alara's eyes are wide with horror, but her vital signs remain stable. The contamination isn't killing her, it's teaching her a new way to live. The implications chill me more than any direct assault would, because this suggests intelligence, purpose, and a patience that spans geological time. We advance along a path that forms as we look at it, tissue stiffening underfoot into something resembling a walkway. The corridor opens onto what should be a standard Mechanicus maintenance bay, but instead reveals a vast garden of impossible vitality. Towering structures that might once have been atmospheric. Processors now resemble massive, fleshy stalks with bark like the inside of a cheek. Their crowns not leaves, but membranes that gather condensation and shiver with each heartbeat rising from the ground. The air, actual air in hard vacuum, hugs us with damp insistence, thick enough to see, shimmering with spores that dance in 7-pointed geometric patterns. The first servitor gardener appears around a hedge that looks ornamental at first glance, trimmed to crisp edges with such care that pride lives in the work. Then the hedge breathes, its leaves revealed as fingernails, translucent and riddled with lunuli that align into miniature aquilae when the light hits them properly. Human hair in every shade weaves its structure, swaying toward us with vegetable hunger. The servitor moves with mechanical precision, but its rebreather has fused directly to skull bone, in patterns that suggest surgical modification rather than battle damage. One arm terminates in a corroded scythe that weeps acidic residue onto the floor, where it pools and feeds root networks spreading beneath our feet. The creature hums as it works, a 7-note melody that harmonizes with the funeral bells tolling in ways that make my teeth ache. Its movements follow the same pattern. Tend, water, prune, pause, tend, water, prune, with mechanical devotion that speaks of programming deeper than mere servitor conditioning. When it notices our presence, it doesn't react with alarm, but simply continues its work, while regarding us with eye sockets filled with flowering bulbs that track our movement with vegetable patience. The hedge it tends blooms with vox speakers that cry out in voices I recognize from missing persons reports, filed across the sector, each bloom carrying a different voice, but all singing the same fragment. Count to 7, the gate will answer. When Trooper Caney finally opens fire, his last bolt strikes the servitor center mass, disrupting its rhythm and causing it to stagger backward into the hedge. But instead of falling, it merges partially with the organic growth, its blood feeding the root system and causing the vox speakers to bloom more vibrantly. The children's voices rise in what might be joy or pain, impossible to distinguish, and the servitor's humming becomes harmony that transforms the corridor into a living instrument. The hedge reaches toward us with tendrils that gleam with the same acidic residue, and I realize with growing horror that our presence isn't an intrusion, it's an invitation. Ahead, a massive iris hatch dilates without activation, revealing a spiral corridor lined with chitinous bells that shimmer with oily luminescence. As my helmet lamp sweeps across them, they begin to chime, 7 notes that resonate directly in our bones, bypassing our audio filters to ring in the hollows of our skulls. The melody weaves through our sealed systems, and I feel my breathing beginning to synchronize with the pattern despite conscious resistance. The spiral descends into deeper levels of the facility, and from its depths comes the sound of children singing the litany of pure breath, in voices that carry the weight of absolute faith, corrupted into something that praises decay rather than divine order. My chronometer shows 4 hours and 19 minutes until orbital bombardment, but the numbers flicker occasionally, jumping backward by seconds that feel like hours. Time itself feels negotiable in this place, subject to the same organic laws that govern the breathing walls and impossible atmosphere. The cold air rising from the spiral staircase carries the promise of revelations that will test every oath I've sworn in service to the Golden Throne, and as the chitinous bells toll their 7-note welcome, I know we have no choice but to descend into whatever nightmare has learned to count in the spaces between heartbeats. The spiral descent draws us deeper into what architectural records designate as Research Level Gamma 7. But the imperial blueprints stored in my data slate bear no resemblance to the organic cathedral that unfolds around us. The chitinous bells line every surface with predatory patience, their oil-slick surfaces rippling between the deep purple of fresh bruises and the sickly green of infected wounds. Each step triggers harmonics that build upon themselves, 7-note patterns that bypass our audio dampeners to resonate directly in the hollow spaces of our bones. The cold air rising from the depths carries not the sterile chill of vacuum, but the cloying sweetness of decay mixed with something that might be crushed mint if mint could grow in graveyards. The walls have transformed into something that maintains the geometric precision of Mechanicus architecture, while embracing principles that would make a tech priest weep. What was once sacred imperial iconography has been composted, not destroyed, but transformed into arrangements that corrupt meaning while maintaining form. Aquila reliefs have become arrangements of human bones wrapped in flowering vines that weep acidic tears, their proud eagles now spreading wings of sinew and cartilage that pulse with the facility's heartbeat. Cog skulls sprout from junction boxes like mechanical flowers, their eye sockets filled with bioluminescent fungi that pulse in synchronized 7-beat patterns, casting shadows that dance with organic rhythm across walls that breathe with patient persistence. The air grows visibly thick, a greenish haze that clings to our visors despite sealed atmospheric systems. My auspex chirps with readings that make my blood run cold. Bioscan, particulate density rising, heart rate, cohort sync, 87%. The impossible statistic makes my scalp prickle beneath the skull cap. Our heartbeats are synchronizing with the facility's rhythm despite conscious resistance. Private Ilara moves with mechanical precision now, her breathing perfectly matched to that impossible pulse, the lung that bloomed from her, rebreather pulsing with satisfied rhythm. When she speaks, her voice carries harmonics that weren't there before. The air tastes of home, she says, and I realize with growing horror that she means barbarous, a world none of us have ever visited. a death world that exists only in classified files and the nightmares of those who study the traitor legions. Confessor Matthias prays under his breath, 7 words, pause, 7 words, a void-born habit for rationing oxygen that here becomes indulgence. His rosarius ticks softly against his armor, but when I glance at his prayer rope, there are more knots than there should be. I watched him count them in the transport, 50 for habit, 7 for vows, 1 for penance, and now the strand shows extra knots that weren't there minutes ago, small, neat, perfect additions that appear between prayers. He doesn't notice. On the 7th word of his whispered litanies, his voice doubles for an instant, harmony in a dialect I recognize from Plague World hymnals. The corruption isn't destroying his faith, it's redirecting it, offering him a version of the Emperor's truth that embraces entropy as divine will. We pass maintenance consoles half subsumed into walls thick with pale roots that weave around brass toggles and rune keys like decorative filigree. When I clear the organic growth with a sanctified scalpel and power the nearest console, it breathes. The hololith projects data that Magos Errant Theta 7 translates with increasing distortion in his Vox transmissions. Purchase orders, requisitions, all properly stamped. Barbarous pattern growth medium. Gene sample smears with oxidized iron taste signature. Mortarion reference. His binary cant carries harmonics that taste of machine oil mixed with grave loam, and I realize that even through remote observation, the facility's influence reaches across impossible distances to touch him. The corridor opens onto what was once a sanctum dedicated to the Emperor's glory, but now serves purposes that corrupt meaning while maintaining form. The sacred texts carved into breathing walls remain readable, but additional letters have grown between the original inscriptions like cancer in healthy tissue, changing "the Emperor protects" into "the Emperor perfects through decay," and "faith is our shield" into "faith is our seed." The children's singing grows louder, voices carrying from throat pods that line the sanctum's upper reaches like grotesque fruit. Each pod contains a human head, grafted to plant stems, their faces peaceful in expressions of absolute devotion, while their mouths open in silent song that produces oxygen instead of sound. In my private Vox channel, with encryption so tight I can hear the strain in the cipher, static crackles and resolves into my own voice. Older, rougher, patience eroded by hours I haven't yet lived. Kalen. When the cold air rises, do not breathe with them. The choir is bait. Their oxygen is a sacrament. Count wrong. The transmission carries authentication codes that match my neural pattern exactly, but the timestamp reads hours into an impossible future. 7 is a blade. Use 8. The channel dissolves into latticed binary that hisses like rain on static before cutting to dead silence. Source? Sergeant Hale whispers, because he has heard enough war to recognize prophecy when it crawls through his teeth. Private channel, I answer, throat dry with implications I don't want to consider. Authenticated to me. The words taste of brass and temporal displacement, but I don't say the word future. I think it, and it feels like blasphemy against the natural order of cause and effect. We encounter the first servitor gardener in a chamber that architectural records identify as a data crypt, but which has been transformed into a meticulously tended grove. The creature kneels in maintenance posture before a hedge trimmed into precise geometric patterns, beautiful craftsmanship until you see the materials. Human hair rooted in pink flesh that has learned to mimic topiary. Fingernails layered like scales, cuticles shining with dew that smells of rain on poisoned soil. Its rebreather has fused to skull bone in patterns that suggest surgical modification rather than battle damage. One arm replaced by a corroded scythe that weeps acidic ichor. The other terminating in a watering apparatus that mists the hair plants with nutrient solution. The servitor hums its 7-note hymn while tending its garden, movements following ritual precision. Tend, water, prune, pause, tend, water, prune. When it notices our presence, it doesn't react with alarm, but simply continues its work while regarding us with eye sockets filled with flowering bulbs that track our movement with vegetable patience. Vox speakers woven beneath the hedge's surface crackle to life, children's voices rising in overlapping harmonies. Welcome the growth. Embrace the change, they sing in 7-word phrases that make the walls pulse faster with delight. Trooper Caney's last bolt strikes the servitor center mass, disrupting its rhythm and causing it to stagger into the hedge. But instead of falling, it begins to dissolve, its synthetic components melting into dark fluid that the hedge drinks with visible, obscene thirst. The hair plants thrash wildly, and the Vox speakers scream, not in pain, but in perverse ecstasy, as if the servitor's death feeds something larger than itself. The organic matter glows faintly where the energy struck, and I realize with sick fascination that the facility doesn't just tolerate violence, it metabolizes it, transforming destruction into nourishment for continued growth. The geometric patterns of 7-fold symmetry dominate everything now. The arrangement of the hair plants, the branching of fungal growths, even the way shadows fall across surfaces that breathe with patient rhythm. This entire facility is a fractal nightmare, each component reflecting the terrible order of its master. My chronometer hiccups, 0347 ticks to 0346 to 0345, then jumps backward to 0346 again, before displaying 366 for a heartbeat too long. Time itself feels negotiable here, subject to the same organic laws that govern breathing walls and impossible atmospheres. Masks locked, I order, though they already are. On my cadence, 8 count. The number feels ugly in my mouth after so long surrounded by 7s, but ugly is good. Ugly means resistance. Matthias's breath stutters as he tries to break the 7-beat pattern that has become as natural as his own pulse. Hale repeats the order with parade ground authority, anchoring discipline against the seductive rhythm that wants to pull us deeper into communion with whatever waits in the facility's heart. From the depths ahead comes a bass bell's toll that makes the corridor shudder around us, a sound so deep it registers as pressure rather than audio. The condensation on our visors begins to fall upward in defiance of gravity, each droplet catching bioluminescent light as it rises toward a ceiling lined with throat pods that sing wordless harmonies. The facility's heartbeat grows stronger with each passing moment, and I feel it beginning to synchronize with my own pulse, despite the 8-count breathing pattern that tastes of rebellion against natural order. The children's voices carry up from deeper levels, no longer singing the litany of pure breath, but chanting something older, something that predates imperial doctrine and speaks to evolutionary truths that make my spine crawl with recognition. The bass bell tolls again, and in its resonance, I hear something that might be laughter or weeping, the sound of something vast and ancient preparing to reveal itself to visitors who have wandered too far from the light of the golden throne. The cold air exhaling from the depths carries promises of transformation, of evolution beyond the crude limitations of baseline humanity, and as we prepare to descend deeper into whatever nightmare has learned to count in the spaces between heartbeats, I know we are approaching the moment when investigation becomes initiation, when observers become participants in a ritual older than the Imperium itself. The bass bell's final toll draws us deeper into what architectural records designate as the primary research sanctum, but the chamber that opens before us defies every principle of sacred architecture I have studied in my decades of service to the Ordo Sepulturum. The descent follows a spiral that tightens with each step, 7-fold angles telescoping into each other until my eyes ache from trying to process geometry that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. I force the 8 count into my lungs. Inhale on the Emperor's name. Hold 2. Exhale on the throne. Hold 2. And feel the rhythm snag against the facility's pulse like a broken gear refusing to mesh with its intended mechanism. The throat pods reveal themselves in their full horror as we enter the sanctum proper, arranged along the walls in ascending spirals that follow mathematical precision no human architect would choose. Each pod contains a child's head, grafted to plant stems with surgical care that speaks of devotion rather than butchery, their faces wearing expressions of absolute peace that makes my stomach clench with unwilling recognition of beauty. Their eyes remain closed in what might be prayer or dreams, mouths opening and closing in perfect synchronization to produce not sound, but oxygen. Pure, sweet air that makes our rebreathers taste like iron and recycled death by comparison. The children's silent song creates an atmosphere so rich it shimmers with visible density, and despite our sealed systems, I can taste its sweetness on my tongue like communion wine mixed with grave loam. Each exhalation from the throat pods carries the 7-beat rhythm that has haunted us since entering this cursed facility. But now I understand the pattern's true purpose. They are breathing for something else, their combined respiratory function maintaining atmospheric pressure in a space that should be hard vacuum, their metabolic processes creating an environment so perfectly suited to human habitation that our bodies respond with involuntary gratitude that feels like betrayal. Trooper Cast coughs, a small thing at first, a dry click in the channel that makes Sergeant Hale's head snap toward him with parade ground attention. The second cough rattles metal inside his rebreather. The third produces artifacts that make my blood run cold. Tiny brass bells, 7 of them, tumbling against his chin grill and ringing once each as they patter across the organic mesh beneath our feet. They dissolve like frost in sunlight, leaving only moisture that runs upward toward the ceiling in defiance of gravity's tyranny. Cast's vitals remain steady on my display, but when he speaks, his voice carries harmonic overtones that his own vocal cords cannot produce. Fine, sir. I'm perfectly fine now. The word fine arrives with resonances that taste of rain on poisoned soil. My Auspex chirps with readings that mock every principle of void survival I learned in the Scholar Progenium. Atmospheric composition, optimal for human habitation, oxygen content, 127% baseline, heart rate, cohort sync, 91%. The impossible statistics tell a story of perfect environmental control achieved through methods that violate every natural law, and I realize with growing horror that our breathing is synchronizing despite conscious resistance, our hearts beginning to beat in time with that impossible pulse rising from the facility's core. Confessor Matthias prays with increasing fervor, but his litanies carry harmonics that weren't there in the transport. 7-word phrases that praise the Emperor's glory while somehow embracing entropy as divine will. His rosarius ticks against his armor with mechanical precision, but the prayer rope in his left hand shows knots that appear between invocations, small, perfect additions that he doesn't notice, each one corresponding to a throat pod's exhalation. When he reaches the 7th word of each verse, his voice doubles for an instant, harmony in a dialect that makes my spine crawl with recognition of barbarous field recordings. Emperor attend, Emperor attend. Grant us the strength to endure, to endure, to endure. The walls themselves have become a living mandala, geometric patterns carved into breathing stone that shifts between imperial iconography and something older, more fundamental. What was once a colossal statue of the emperor now stands half submerged in a pool of viscous dark fluid, his face obscured by fungal blooms that weep acidic tears onto golden raiment transformed into something that resembles both imperial regalia and burial shroud. Aquilus spread wings of bone and sinew while maintaining perfect bilateral symmetry, their beaks opened in silent screams that produce not sound, but spores that drift toward our filters with maternal hunger. I clear organic growth from what appears to be a standard information terminal and activate its display, watching as the screen flickers to life with requisition orders that make my scalp prickle beneath the skullcap. Purchase orders for barbarous pattern growth medium, stamped with Mechanicus seals that authenticate properly despite requesting materials that should not exist. Gene sample analysis reports with oxidized iron taste signatures that match classified Death Guard biological profiles stored in the deepest vaults of the Ordo Sepulturum. Most disturbing of all, maintenance schedules that praised the Pale Gardener in acrostic patterns hidden within routine atmospheric processing protocols, signed with authorization codes that trace back to Magos xenobiologist Hostian. Magos errant Theta 7's voice crackles through the vox with increasing distortion, his binary cant carrying harmonics that taste of machine oil mixed with grave loam. Administrative anomaly detected, cross-referencing. Requisitions approved by Magos Hostian, authorization codes valid, but subject classification exceeds clearance parameters. Displaying liturgical modifications, revision 7. His mathematical precision wavers as he continues. Hymnals prepared, full choir specification, in obedience to the Pale Gardener. Even through remote observation, the facility's influence reaches across impossible distances to touch those who study its mysteries. The first servitor gardener appears around a hedge that looks ornamental until you see the materials. Human hair rooted in pink flesh that has learned to mimic topiary. Fingernails layered like scales to create texture and depth. Cuticles shining with dew that carries the scent of rain on poisoned soil. The craftsmanship is exquisite, beautiful in ways that make my aesthetic sense rebel against moral judgment. The creature kneels in maintenance posture, its rebreather fused to skull bone in patterns that suggest surgical modification rather than battle damage, one arm replaced by a corroded scythe that weeps acidic ichor, the other terminating in a watering apparatus that mists the hair plants with nutrient solution. It hums while it works, a 7-note melody that harmonizes with the throat pod's silent song in ways that make my teeth ache with harmonic resonance. Its movements follow ritual precision: tend, water, prune, pause, tend, water, prune. When it notices our presence, it doesn't react with alarm, but simply continues its work, while regarding us with eye sockets filled with flowering bulbs that track our movement with vegetable patience. The hedge responds to our approach with visible excitement, vox speakers woven beneath its surface crackling to life with children's voices. Welcome the growth. Embrace the change. Count to 7. The gate will answer. My private vox channel hisses with static that resolves into my own voice, older and rougher, patience eroded by experiences I haven't yet endured. Kalen. The servitor is bait. The hedge is a mouth. When it blooms, count wrong and do not pray on the 7th. Whatever you admire will be what you keep. The authentication codes match my neural pattern exactly, but the timestamp reads hours into an impossible future. Trust the 8 count, break their rhythm. The transmission dissolves into binary that tastes of temporal displacement before cutting to silence. The facility's heartbeat grows stronger with each passing moment, rising from the depths with seismic force that makes the floor pulse beneath our boots. My chronometer displays impossible readings: 0323, then 0322, then 366 for a heartbeat too long before settling on 0321. Time itself feels negotiable here, subject to the same organic laws that govern the breathing walls and impossible atmospheres. The bass bell tolls again from somewhere far below, and in its resonance I hear something that might be laughter or weeping. The sound of something vast and ancient preparing to reveal itself. The hedge begins to bloom with flowers that look like human mouths, each petal a lip that parts to reveal vox speakers crying out in voices I recognize from missing persons reports filed across the sector. The children's song rises to harmonies that bypass our audio dampeners to resonate directly in the hollow spaces of our bones, and as condensation falls upward in defiance of gravity, I realize we are witnessing the prelude to revelations that will test every oath we have sworn in service to the Golden Throne. The cold air rising from deeper levels carries promises of transformation that make my spine crawl with recognition, and as the throat pods sing their silent song of impossible atmospheres, I know we have descended past the point where investigation becomes initiation, where observers become participants in a ritual that has been waiting patiently for witnesses to arrive and complete its ancient, terrible purpose. The hedge's mouthflowers quiver in confusion as I force the eighth breath into my chest, their petal lips closing like disappointed mouths when my rhythm refuses to match their expectation. The servitor gardener's humming stutters for the first time since we encountered it, the flowering bulbs in its eye sockets dimming as if a predator has scented unhealthy meat and decided to wait for better prey. But the disruption is temporary. The facility learns, adapts, and after a moment the creature resumes its seven-note melody while regarding us with what might be amusement. The hedge responds by blooming more vibrantly, each flower revealing itself as a perfect replica of a human mouth, complete with teeth and tongue, the lips parting to release voices that carry fragments of corrupted litanies. Breathe deep the Emperor's gift, count 7 blessings, exhale your fear into fertile soil. The cold air rising from the spiral staircase ahead carries promises that make my spine crawl with evolutionary recognition, but we have no choice except descent. The chitinous bells line every surface of the downward path, their oil-slick surfaces rippling between deep purple and sickly green as we pass. Each step triggers harmonics that build upon themselves, 7-note patterns that bypass our audio dampeners to resonate directly in the hollow spaces of our bones. My Auspex chirps with readings that mock every principle of void survival. Bioscan, genetic drift detected in squad vitals. Atmospheric integration, 96% complete. Heart rate, cohort sync, 98%. We are being transformed so gradually that consciousness hasn't registered the change. Our bodies adapting to an environment that violates natural law, while our minds focus on immediate threats. Trooper Cast coughs again, and this time the brass bells that emerge from his rebreather don't dissolve, but chime with clear, sweet tones that make the corridor's organic growth pulse with visible pleasure. 7 bells, each ringing a different note, and together they form a chord that harmonizes perfectly with the facility's heartbeat. When he speaks, his voice carries harmonic overtones that his vocal cords cannot produce. The air tastes like home, sir, like the mountains. The word mountains arrives with resonances that taste of rain on poisoned soil. And I realize with sick fascination that Cast has never seen mountains. He was born in the underhive of Tertius Prime, raised on recycled air and artificial light. The spiral concludes in a transept that architectural records designate as a Mechanicus arterial hub, but the chamber that opens before us defies every principle of sacred architecture. Brass catwalks that once crossed here have become rib bones slick with condensation, curving toward a massive arch that flexes like a diaphragm with each beat of the facility's impossible heart. I scrape organic growth from what appears to be a standard information plaque and read Binharic etched beneath. Seed storage. Access on. Authorized liturgy. The authorization sigil belongs to Magos Xenobiologis Hostian, and suddenly the facility's true purpose becomes horrifyingly clear. Beyond the arch lies a vast cathedral space whose columns are transparent sacks hung like grotesque fruit from a canopy of pale tendons and glistening cable. Each sack contains a curled figure floating in amber amniotic gel, their pallid limbs folded with devotional neatness around child-sized scythes of ossified cartilage. Labels float on the sac membranes in softened coglyphs. Dragonfly 7, Dusk Raider 3, Pestis Fey. Designations that correspond to Deathguard Plague Company, signifiers the Ordo keeps in vaults darker than most Inquisitors will ever see. This isn't just a research facility, it's a nursery, a cultivation center for Mortarion's genetic legacy, each homunculus a potential seed for transforming entire worlds into plague gardens. In a devotional alcove that was once a shrine, a cracked censer waits with obscene patience. The brass vessel bears the skull and cog, but pale roots web its surface as if tasting memory through metal. The ash within smells like rain on poisoned soil mixed with old antiseptic, the only sterile scent in this entire facility. Driven by instinct and my future self's cryptic warnings, I dip gloved fingers into the ash and spread a line across a breathing seam that swells like a lip at the threshold. The ash hisses when it touches. Not chemical reaction, but liturgical refusal. The flesh around the line blanches to dead grey, shrivels and flakes into powder that real gravity claims. For the first time since our landing, something here obeys natural law instead of organic tyranny. Magos errant Theta 7's voice crackles through the vox with increasing distortion, his binary cant now carrying harmonics that taste of machine oil mixed with grave loam. Seed vault confirmed, cross-referencing, facility engines spooling for warp translation, estimated time to translation, T-minus 47 minutes. His mathematical precision wavers as he continues. Theological implications detected. The Omnissiah's truth encompasses all knowledge, including that which grows in darkness, requesting permission to establish direct interface. Even through remote observation, the facility's influence reaches across impossible distances to corrupt those who study its mysteries, with offers of understanding that transcend orthodox limitations. A sack above us twitches out of sequence, its membrane bulging like blistered paint before peeling with obscene delicacy. Amniotic gel spills in a slow sheet, and the figure within drops lightly as if gravity would not presume to bruise it. The creature is the size of a mortal child, but wrong in ways my eyes register as health until training corrects them. Lungs too deep, ribcage sprung to house bellows, proportions that suggest evolution beyond baseline human limitations. Its eyes open with no startle, only recognition, the color of poison green grave fungus. When it speaks, it does so in barbarous hill dialect that I should not understand yet my mind processes with chilling clarity. Mountain-born, it says, and the name makes something cold trace my spine because Barbarous names the children of high places after what they endure. You counted wrong. Good. Its mouth quivers with what might be amusement, voice carrying the weight of ancient patience. The garden has been waiting for your arrival. From somewhere within its small form, it produces a pulsating organic orb, roughly the size of a human heart, its surface a swirling vortex of greens and purples that pulse in time with my own heartbeat. The seed of blight. As it holds the orb aloft, I feel memories that aren't mine flooding through my consciousness. Rain on a cold, poisoned mountain, the sweet decay of autumn leaves, the comforting embrace of disease transformed into evolutionary gift. The homunculus cradles the orb like a votive offering, small palms extended toward me with ceremonial precision. Take the seed, it whispers, 7 words that make the vault's breathing deepen with anticipation. Command the garden, spare your worlds. Its presence causes reality distortions that make my teeth ache. Shadows detach from their sources to move independently across the floor. The 7-beat rhythm becomes visible as ripples in the air, and my chronometer displays impossible readings that mock linear time. Above us, every sack in the vault flexes toward our position, the scythe-shaped cartilage in each dreamer's hand drifting through gel like seeds turning to face the sun. My auspex screams with warnings. Warp resonance detected, psychic pressure critical, translation, subsystems, spooling, T-minus 43 minutes. The facility intends to step sideways into the immaterium with its cargo of seeds, and once in the warp's tides, it will cast them across human worlds that would breathe gratefully when voices tell them what to do with their lungs. The choice crystallizes with terrible clarity. Accept the seed and become gardener to this nightmare, or watch as 14 other facilities across the sector complete their own translations, spreading Mortarion's gifts to worlds that have no defense against corruption that offers evolution as salvation. The orb pulses in my direction with the vault's rhythm. 7 beats, pause, 7 beats, then stutters as it finds my rebellious 8 count and answers with confused harmony. The homunculus steps closer, its ancient eyes holding patience that spans geological time, and I realize that this moment has been orchestrated across decades of careful cultivation. The facility didn't just grow these seeds, it grew us, drew us here through investigation and duty, transforming observers into participants in a ritual that offers transcendence at the cost of everything we have sworn to protect. The cold air exhaling from deeper levels carries the weight of Mortarion's presence, and as the seed of blight pulses with promises of understanding that transcend the crude limitations of baseline humanity, I know we have reached the moment where choice becomes destiny, where the investigation transforms into initiation in mysteries older than the Imperium itself. The seed of blight pulses against my palm like a captured heart, warm as breath and slick with condensation that beads in 7 perfect drops before rolling into my lifeline. The moment organic matter touches my glove, Mortarion's memories flood through my consciousness like poison through an open wound. I am standing on a mountain peak shrouded in toxic mist, breathing air that should kill but instead strengthens, watching a figure in tattered robes tend gardens of impossible beauty, where death and decay intertwine in patterns that speak of love rather than horror. Rain strikes my face through a rebreather that tastes of vinegar and rust, and the sky wears the colour of old bruises. I am smaller and endless, a child who learned to find beauty in entropy, who discovered that corruption could be a gift rather than a curse. The facility responds to my contact with the seed by accelerating its transformation, walls flowing like water as they shed their last pretense of imperial architecture. Bone grows with theatrical humility from the floor, fingers of calcified growth curling into armrests, while tendons lacquered with condensation tensor across a frame, adjusting until the throne's seat matches the measure of my femurs. A canopy unfurls that could be cathedral vaulting if cathedrals breathed. Sockets blink open in the armrests, ovoid and wet, waiting for my wrists, with a lover's anticipation. The environment recognizes me as potential gardener, reshaping itself with organic patience to accommodate its new master. Through the seed's connection, understanding crystallizes with horrifying clarity. Our litany of pure breath, 7 words, pause, 7 words, has not defended us, but taught the garden the rhythm of our compliance. I test this revelation with malice, speaking 7 words deliberately. Emperor, I defy you with hunger. The floor buds a pale, soft anther that turns toward my voice like a face towards sunlight. I spit the 8th word like a nail. Stop. The growth stutters, wrinkles, browns along its edge, and falls still. The seed shivers in my palm, as if amused by this small rebellion against its mathematical tyranny. Cast's cough rises again, and I turn as his rebreather's grill bulges outward like blistered paint. The grill splits along seams that did not exist moments before, and his chest swells in a slow, serene arc. Flesh blossoms through ceramic and steel in 7-petaled symmetry, each petal a thin lung sheath flushed with capillaries, ringing softly as air flows through trembling lips. Bells, I realize, the sound sculpted by perfused tissue. His vitals remain cruelly stable while he looks at me with eyes that register no pain. Sir, he says, harmonics braided. Through his voice, I can breathe for all of you. I drag ash from the cracked censer in a trembling line across the living scallops. Where grey meets pink, life abrades into modest obedience, the petals browning and sloughing like shed skin. Magos errant. Theta 7's voice returns altered, crisp Mechanicus logic braided through with affable resonance that makes my tongue taste peppermint and mildew. Interfacing via secure relay, he reports, while somewhere behind his words, a softer voice laughs without lungs. The facility offers hierarchy. Acceptance of master key will grant command protocols. This is magnanimity. This is elegant. Even through remote observation, the facility's influence reaches across impossible distances to corrupt those who study its mysteries with offers of understanding that transcend orthodox limitations. The homunculus watches with tranquil gravity, lifting a delicate hand to trace circles around my head. Chitinous bells alter pitch obediently, spinning lattices that make arm hairs stand rigid against my suit's lining. 7 commands to open the heart, it whispers. 7 seeds to wake a world. Choose the mercy you were denied. Time unspools on my chronometer, numbers wobbling like caught fish. The seed lifts more memories from deep soil. A son looking at a father he cannot love because love has learned to wear rot like a crown. The logic is terrible and consistent. Endurance made theology, decay made ethics. Gardens planted in surrender's shape. The throne leans closer, intimate as confession, and for a heartbeat I want to sit. The seed's warmth spreads through my consciousness like fever breaking, and suddenly I am breathing barbarous air through lungs that have never known clean atmosphere. The mountain slopes stretch endlessly beneath a sky the color of old bruises, each inhalation bringing strength instead of death, because endurance has transformed poison into sacrament. I watch through borrowed eyes as careful hands tend gardens where human bones serve as trellises for flowering vines, where decay feeds beauty in cycles that span centuries rather than seasons. This is not corruption, but cultivation. The memories whisper. This patient transformation of suffering into transcendence through understanding that entropy serves evolution rather than ending it. The facility responds to my deepening connection by shedding its final pretense of imperial architecture, walls flowing like heated wax as they absorb geometric constraints that once defined corridors and chambers. What emerges follows organic principles that breathe with tidal rhythm, passages that dilate to guide movement, while surfaces weep nutrient-rich condensation in patterns that spell devotional phrases in languages older than Gothic. The air itself becomes a living entity, pressing against my sealed rebreather with the weight of Mortarion's presence, carrying spores that dance in 7-pointed formations while promising evolutionary advancement beyond baseline human limitations. Movement flashes in peripheral shadow as the first biomechanical guardian detaches from a pillar like a mantis shedding bark. The servitor's spinal column anchors to a bowl of vascular wood, mycelium threads woven through thoracic cavities, while its skull disappears beneath a pruning visor lacquered with sap. One arm terminates in shears that glitter with wet edges, the other extruding a watering apparatus whose perforations weep paralytic secretions that hiss against metal surfaces. 5 more step free in staggered intervals, their rhythm exact, 3 paces, adjust, incline, 3 paces, each footfall landing in 7-beat cadence that makes conventional tactics impossible. Sergeant Hale's voice cuts through humid air with parade ground authority, and the squad blooms into practiced geometry. Lasfire braids red across the breathing chamber, bolts finding targets that respond with organic adaptation rather than destruction. When Trooper Kane's shot bursts a Guardian's visor in a spray of lacquer and vitreous humor, the creature doesn't scream, but simply adjusts angle, shears singing as they clip fragments from his shoulder plate. His status rune dips, then stabilizes, and condensation sweats through the severed ceramic as if the armor itself has learned to perspire. I pull the 8-count breathing pattern like rope against drowning, measured rebellion that makes the seed pulse with amused recognition. With the smallest flex of will, I taste the chamber's geometry as a gardener would taste soil composition. The floor learns to become a mouth beneath advancing guardians, lips of cartilage pursing around ivory teeth before clamping shut. 2 stumble in perfect synchrony, and I scatter more ash from the cracked censer, grey powder falling in protective circles that brown organic matter at the rim and lock it into inert patterns. Confessor Matthias steps forward, with his rosarius held like a star against drowning darkness, voice beginning on familiar rails as the litanies of abjuration rise from trained memory. The first verse holds true with sacred power, but the second curdles as the facility embraces his prayers rather than rejecting them. On the 7th word of the 3rd verse, his tongue twists around syllables that belong to no imperial creed, barbarous dialect entering his throat as the prayer becomes harvest song, praising the grandfather's patience and thanking rain for the bones it reveals. Moss etches itself along his rosarius chain, delicate fronds drinking the relic's light while transforming sacred symbols into something that serves different masters. My auspex screams warnings through the humid air. Warp resonance detected. Psychic pressure severe. Translation subsystems T-23 minutes. The facility prepares its dimensional translation while I fight the seed's seductive whispers, each use of its power costing me pieces of identity I may never recover. Through its connection, I sense the vast network spanning 14 facilities across the sector, each node preparing for simultaneous activation that would spread Mortarion's gifts to worlds with no defense against corruption, offering evolution as salvation. The Guardians adjust to our tactics, with instructors' patience, learning from each engagement while the facility reshapes corridors to make our choices appear inevitable. When Hale orders suppressing fire on the left flank, 3 Guardians peel away in perfect counter-rhythm, blades preempting his tactical arc, with movements that suggest programming deeper than servitor conditioning. The environment itself becomes combatant, walls presenting soft surfaces to absorb explosive force while releasing clouds of glittering spores that etch geometric patterns across any exposed surfaces. From the chamber's far transept, a massive figure detaches from the living wall with cathedral door solemnity. Brass and bone articulate with mechanical courtesy, while robes hang in wet pleats over an exoskeleton of grafted limbs, servo arms tipped with surgical implements that weep the same paralytic secretions. Tubes feed the figure from ceiling umbilicals like devotional offerings, and where a face should exist beneath the hood, hammered copper masks smooth features into coin-like anonymity. The 7-spoked cog stamped into the metal bears wreaths of blight that pulse with the facility's heartbeat, and when the figure inclines fractionally in acknowledgement, every bell in the vault answers with chords that taste of rusted rain and ancient patience. This is Magos Xenobiology's Hostian, transformed beyond recognition, yet retaining enough of his original form to make the corruption more horrifying than simple destruction would have been. His presence fills the chamber with authority that transcends mere physical mass, and I realize, with growing dread, that we have finally encountered the architect of this nightmare. The mind that conceived gardens capable of growing in the spaces between stars, while teaching humanity new ways to breathe in atmospheres that should not exist. Magos Xenobiologis. Hostian speaks through 3 voices braided into harmonious discourse. His original clinical precision layered beneath the facility's wet whisper and something deeper that tastes of rain on poisoned mountains. The brass masks beneath his hood shift with each syllable, revealing glimpses of transformation rather than corruption, flesh and metal achieving synthesis that transcends both organic weakness and mechanical rigidity. Interrogator Voss, the machine voice intones, while the facility adds chirurgeon, and that distant resonance finishes tender of new growth. His presence fills the chamber with authority that makes gravity itself seem negotiable, the 7-spoked cogwork at his breast pulsing with rhythms that paint the humid air in phosphorescent harmonics. The facility responds to its creator's presence by accelerating metamorphosis, walls flowing like heated wax as they shed geometric constraints that once defined imperial architecture. Hostian explains with patient authority that the cultivation project was never about weaponization, but evolution, humanity's inevitable progression beyond baseline limitations and orthodox mechanicus sterility. He demonstrates by removing his rebreather with ceremonial precision, inhaling atmosphere that would kill lesser beings while his modified respiratory system processes compounds into nourishment. This facility serves as chrysalis, the overlapping voices continue, servo arms unfolding to gesture at the transparent sacs. Each homunculus represents successful cultivation, perfect synthesis of adaptability and capability that could transform entire worlds into gardens where death and life achieve balance. Through the seed's deepening connection, I feel Mortarion's memories flooding my consciousness, with each of Hostion's words, the Primarch's twisted love for decay, becoming comprehensible as natural process rather than corruption. The facility's bioarchitecture responds to this philosophical revelation by sprouting weapon limbs that track our movements with predatory patience, pruning shears singing through humid air, watering apparatus misting paralytic compounds, grafting tools gleaming with surgical precision. The floor beneath Sergeant Hale becomes digestive surface, enzymes seeping through ceramic plating to begin molecular dissolution that would transform his armor into nutrients for continued growth. Combat intensifies as conventional tactics prove useless against an environment that learns from each engagement, adapting responses with instructors' patience while reshaping corridors to make our choices inevitable. When Cast attempts flanking maneuvers, walls flow to block his advance while presenting soft surfaces that absorb lasfire without damage. The energy-feeding root networks that glow brighter with each impact. I use the seed's power to create barriers of calcified growth, feeling the cost in pieces of identity as Mortarion's perspective becomes more vivid, more compelling. The facility recognizes my commands, ribs rising when I will bulwarks, passages opening when I name retreat. But each miracle makes the 7-beat rhythm echo deeper in my marrow. Trooper Ilara vanishes as the floor becomes clamp, teeth like porcelain closing around her waist before we can react. The mouth chews once with gracious satisfaction, swallowing ceramic and flesh as if that were the required portion. Kaney's shoulder plate dissolves under acidic mist, while his breathing apparatus blooms with additional lung petals that ring like bells, harmonizing with Hostion's voices in ways that make my teeth ache. I scatter ash from the cracked sensor in protective circles, watching organic matter brown and retreat from the sterile boundary. My chronometer displays T-17 minutes as the facility prepares dimensional translation, Hostion's overlapping voices, offering final choice wrapped in logic so terrible and consistent that training struggles against its seductive clarity. Accept the seed's full power and become gardener to this nightmare, or watch as 14 facilities escape into warp tides to cast gifts across human worlds that would breathe gratefully when evolution serves survival better than stagnation. The weight presses against my consciousness like atmospheric pressure, and I realize everything has been orchestrated to bring us to this moment where investigation becomes initiation, where observers become participants in rituals older than the Imperium itself. Acceptance becomes posture rather than vow, as I cradle the seed against my palm with ceremonial reverence, allowing Mortarion's memories to flood through my consciousness while secretly mining them for weaknesses rather than wisdom. The facility responds to my apparent surrender with organic delight, walls dilating in welcome, as the throne of bone and sinew flows to embrace my form with lover's patience. Through borrowed understanding gleaned from the Primarch's own knowledge of biological systems, I grasp the terrible truth that even Nurgle's gifts follow natural laws. Every garden requires pruning to prevent overgrowth from strangling itself in uncontrolled abundance. I begin with breath, forcing the 8-count rhythm into my lungs with ceremonial precision while speaking 7 sweet words of false compliance. I accept stewardship in the Pale Gardener's name. The facility's bioarchitecture responds with visible pleasure, bells softening their toll while vascular networks pulse brighter with each syllable. But the 8th beat I drive like a nail through their harmony, feeling the seed shiver with confused recognition as I seed discordant nodes throughout the living geometry, commanding pauses that cannot be obeyed and requesting feeds that do not exist. The cracked sensor's ash becomes my weapon of surgical precision, grey powder scattered along breathing seams and pulsing nodes, where it hisses against organic matter like liturgical refusal. Where sterile mathematics meets 7-fold symmetry, the facility's perfect patterns brown at the edges and curl like paper near flame, circulation failing as load-bearing structures lose their harmonic coordination. I draw grey ciphers over arterial junctions, watching root networks starve as their nutrient flows collapse into dead tissue that obeys gravity rather than the garden's organic tyranny. Hostion's overlapping voices carry increasing distortion as his connection to the facility begins fragmenting, brass masks shifting beneath his hood to reveal glimpses of transformation, becoming dissolution. Adjustment noted, his voices say with diminishing harmony, but the corrective measures fail as I flood critical systems with anti-pattern, 8-point starbursts, disrupting circulation, while ash argues with every surface it touches. The biomechanical guardians stagger as their coordination collapses, pruning implements falling silent while their 7-beat rhythm dissolves into mechanical stuttering. The facility's death throes manifest as environmental collapse that violates every natural law, walls convulsing in epileptic spasms while their organic surfaces blister and slough like shed skin. The transparent sacs begin rupturing in sequence, amniotic gels spilling across calcified surfaces as homunculi dissolve into component molecules that the dying garden can no longer sustain. Cast's extra lung petals shrivel under grey influence and fold like dead moths, their bell songs sinking to tin mutters as he whispers with grateful relief. It's quiet. My auspex screams warnings through the humid air as Hostion triggers emergency translation in desperate attempt to escape with whatever remains of his corrupted paradise. Warp field, unstable. Translation, T-3 minutes. Dimensional barriers. Critical failure. The chamber shudders with violence that threatens to drag us into the immaterium's hungry tides, reality tearing around us as space-time stretches into impossible geometries. The Magos's consciousness fragments completely, his 3 voices becoming 2, then 1, then silence punctuated by mechanical whimpering as the network that sustained his expanded awareness crumbles under sterile influence. Through the seed's connection, I sense the vast network spanning 14 facilities across the sector, each node pulsing with readiness for simultaneous translation that would cast Mortarion's gifts across human worlds, with no defense against corruption, offering evolution as salvation. The opportunity crystallizes with terrible precision. If I maintain connection while the facility destroys itself, I might send poison signal through the network, corrupting other nodes with the same sterile mathematics that has transformed this garden into graveyard. The risk demands sacrificing pieces of identity I may never recover, riding the facility's death scream across dimensions that exist between heartbeats while forcing anti-pattern through connections designed for organic harmony. Each pulse costs memories I will never reclaim. Childhood prayers, faces of fallen comrades, the taste of recaf on distant worlds. But the signal strengthens with each sacrifice. Through dying connections, I sense something vast and ancient stirring in response to sabotage, attention turning toward me with geological patience. Mortarion himself becomes aware of corruption spreading through his carefully cultivated network, and his rage builds like atmospheric pressure before continental storm. The facility burns with warp fire as the Primarch attempts severing network connection by destroying its source, but I hold fast to the seed's cold fire, preparing to cast sterile poison across impossible distances, while reality negotiates with psychic force that could shatter worlds. The network unfolds through my expanded consciousness like luminescent, mycelium threading between stars, 14 facilities pulsing with synchronized readiness across the sector as their warp engines prepare dimensional translation. Through the seed's connection, each node appears as both lung and mind, breathing impossible atmospheres while processing fragments of Mortarion's distributed consciousness that would merge during translation to form strategic intelligence spanning galactic distances. The revelation strikes with crystalline horror. This was never about individual plague worlds, but about establishing living network capable of coordinating biological warfare on scales that would make the Great Crusade seem like tribal skirmish. I begin transmission of poison signal through dying connections, forcing 8-point patterns through channels designed for 7-fold harmony, as sterile mathematics propagates like infection through arterial networks. Each pulse costs memories I will never reclaim. Childhood prayers dissolving into routing protocols, faces of fallen comrades traded for network topology, the taste of hive recaf, sacrificed to understand redundancy maps. Through borrowed awareness, I witnessed distant facilities beginning their collapse as careful symmetries break down into random mutations, biomechanical systems consuming themselves in cascading failures that transform cultivation into cremation. The facility around me tears itself apart as competing imperatives war within its living architecture, walls flowing like heated wax before crystallizing into brittle formations that shatter under contradictory demands. Growth commands battle decay instructions, while the 7-beat rhythm fragments into chaotic arrhythmia that makes surviving systems convulse with mechanical seizures. Hostion's form dissolves as his connection fails, brass masks falling like coins, while organic components melt into dark fluid that feeds nothing. His final attempt at emergency translation corrupted by anti-pattern, already infecting the core. My Auspex screams warnings through humid air thick with ozone and dying organic matter. Network signal, detected across 14 nodes. Warp, collapse, imminent. Psychic feedback, severe. Each node's destruction sends jolts of psychic feedback through my connection, waves of agony that threaten to shatter consciousness, while weakening the network's collective awareness. Through dying whispers, I sense something vast and ancient, focusing attention on contamination's source with geological patience. Mortarion himself, becoming aware of sabotage spreading through his carefully cultivated paradise. The Primarch's presence presses against mine through dimensional barriers, not as enemy, but as disappointed father, discovering wayward child's rebellion against natural order. His awareness carries weight of eons spent perfecting decay as sacrament, showing me visions of galaxy's future without his gardens. Endless war and suffering with no hope of transcendence. Humanity locked in stagnation while Xenos species evolve beyond recognition. The temptation flows directly into expanded consciousness, with authority that makes reality seem negotiable, offering liberation from crude flesh through guided transformation where death becomes doorway rather than destination. I maintain focus through stubborn adherence to duty that transcends personal survival, pushing the poison signal toward critical mass as facility after facility succumbs to sterile influence. Their careful cultivation becomes random dissolution, each node's destruction sending feedback through the network while strengthening my ability to corrupt remaining connections. Reality becomes unstable around us as the facility collapses into warp rift, gravity reversing while time flows backward in stuttering loops that make chronometers display impossible readings. Through the network's final moments, I sense other gardeners across the galaxy, humans who accepted similar seeds and now tend plague worlds with devotional precision, their consciousness expanded beyond baseline limitations. They feel the network's collapse like amputation, crying out across impossible distances as expanded perception contracts into individual isolation. Some will survive to plant new gardens, but coordinated threat has been broken, strategic mind fragmented into isolated voices. The chamber fills with warp fire that burns without consuming, cold flames tasting of disappointment rather than destruction as Mortarion's rage manifests through dimensional barriers. His fury at watching paradise wither into sterile wasteland creates psychic storm that threatens to scatter my identity across impossible distances, but the poison signal reaches its target with surgical precision. I feel the seed crumbling in my palm as its power exhausts itself, organic matrix dissolving, while borrowed memories fade like dreams upon waking. Network connections severing with violence that leaves consciousness bleeding at edges, but carries sterile mathematics into corruption's heart across 14 worlds. Mortarion's consciousness descends through dimensional barriers like weather rolling down a poisoned mountain, his presence transforming the facility's dying atmosphere into medium for direct neural communication that bypasses language entirely. The Primarch speaks through reality itself, his thoughts arriving as understanding rather than words, while the air tastes of rain on grave loam and disappointment older than stellar formation. He regards me not as enemy, but as wayward child who has rejected gifts offered with geological patience. And his attention makes the facility's bells stop pretending to be metal, becoming instead extensions of my nervous system that chime with each heartbeat in harmonics, that taste of copper and regret. Through borrowed awareness still echoing from the crumbling seed, I witness his vision of the galaxy's future, without gardens, to guide evolution beyond crude flesh and meaningless suffering. He shows me worlds locked in endless warfare where death serves no purpose beyond perpetuating itself, humanity stagnating while Xenos species transcend through natural selection that the Imperium's rigid doctrine cannot match. Every battlefield I have witnessed becomes evidence of Imperial failure, each hive world's pollution transformed into argument for guided transformation, where decay becomes doorway rather than destination, entropy serving evolution instead of mere ending. The facility burns around us with warp fire that consumes without destroying, cold flames tasting of cosmic disappointment, as gravity reverses in stuttering loops while time flows backward through my chronometer's impossible readings. Reality bends under psychic pressure that could shatter continents, and through the network's dying connections, I feel other facilities across the sector beginning their final collapse as poison signal corrupts their careful symmetries. Each node's destruction sends feedback that weakens Mortarion's distributed consciousness while strengthening my ability to maintain transmission despite the cost in memories dissolving like frost in sunlight. I steady myself on pain, palms slicing against my scalpel's edge until warmth spreads beneath sealed gloves, counting 8 heartbeats like rungs on a ladder dragged up from drowning. He feels the defiance and grows gentle, his presence uncoiling like cloak laid across fevered shoulders while explaining with paternal authority that all order decays, that the Emperor's rigid doctrine serves as tourniquet that will cost the limb. His final temptation carries weight of genuine affection. Become sole gardener of this sector, tending worlds with wisdom earned through suffering, while other regions burn in meaningless conflict, accepting shepherd's role guiding evolution through careful cultivation, rather than surrendering it to entropy's chaos. I counter his vision with names spoken like prayers. Hail, Ilara, Caney, Cast, Matthias. The dead deserve more than uses. The living demand more than explanations wrapped in seductive logic that transforms surrender into transcendence. I pull the 8 count into my lungs and drive it outward as shape, coarse lattice thrown over the roiling pressure of his attention, while drawing ash from the cracked sensor in ugly stars across surfaces that recoil from sterile mathematics. The poison pattern holds in me like spine, burnt into cortex and marrow, even as the seed crumbles to nothing in my palm. The vault buckles as competing realities war for dominance, Hostian sloughing apart at sight's edge while his brass faces slide away like coins lost through grating. The nursery's canopy peels back to reveal the core, a wet aperture dilating with tide pulse black-green shimmer of warp rift forming like bruise under skin. Gravity resolves to indecision, my mag boots skittering as flesh beneath decides to be current instead of floor, while cables grown fat with sap tear free to stream toward that impossible mouth like eels eager for the sea. Mortarion's rage manifests as psychic storm that threatens to scatter consciousness across the Immaterium's hungry tides. But his anger carries undertones of genuine grief for gardens that will never bloom, worlds that will continue suffering without guidance toward evolutionary transcendence. The poison signal reaches critical mass as my awareness stretches across dimensional barriers, forcing sterile influence through connections designed for organic harmony while the network collapses completely. Each facility's destruction sends shockwaves through his distributed intelligence, transforming strategic mind into isolated fragments that lack coordination necessary for galactic-scale biological warfare. The facility implodes around us as reality reasserts natural law with violence that makes atoms scream. And I feel the final transmission complete as sterile poison spreads through the network's corpse, like genetic flaw preventing proper cultivation. The cold flames reach toward me with Mortarion's final gift, understanding that this victory is temporary, that other networks exist beyond this sector, that the Pale Gardener's patience spans geological time, while human lifespans measure themselves in decades rather than millennia. The facility collapses into dimensional space where physics becomes negotiable, the warp rift's hungry mouth swallowing reality in stuttering gulps that taste of ozone and disappointed eternity. Mortarion's presence presses against my consciousness with geological weight, offering final temptation, wrapped in genuine concern. Become sole gardener of this sector, spare billions through compromise that costs only my humanity. His logic carries terrifying sincerity, showing worlds where guided decay serves evolution rather than meaningless suffering, where death becomes doorway instead of destination. I counter with faces rather than arguments, Ilara's hands clawing when the floor became mouth, Cast's eyes when bells grew behind them, Hale's patience ground to wordless prayer he refused to abandon. The 8 count becomes cudgel and compass, each beat driven like nails through harmonic tyranny, while I scatter ash from the cracked sensor in ugly patterns that make organic surfaces recoil from sterile mathematics. Pain anchors me when seduction threatens to overwhelm duty, my palm slicing against the scalpel's edge until warmth spreads beneath sealed gloves. The seed throbs in my hand like panicked animal, realizing cages close on masters too. I complete the transmission by sacrificing my last coherent childhood memory, mother's voice singing lullabies in high Gothic, and feel poison influence propagate through every remaining connection with surgical precision. The network unlaces like knotted twine yanked clean, nodes stuttering across the sector before falling silent as careful cultivation becomes random dissolution. Mortarion's scream echoes across dimensions. Not defeat, but disarray, strategic mind fragmenting into isolated voices lacking coordination for galactic warfare. His presence falters like storm remembering itself as weather, rage transforming to grief for gardens that will never bloom. The facility implodes with violence that makes atoms weep, reality reasserting natural law as the rift cinches to hairline and winks out, leaving stale taste of extinguished incense. I open my palm and deny the seed fingers to cling with. It spasms, splits, crumbles to ash that will not stain as its power exhausts completely. The biomechanical growth withers to grey dust clinging to shattered bulkheads like funeral shroud. Impossible atmosphere sucked back into hard vacuum. My rebreather's emergency seals snap shut with deafening hiss in sudden silence. My auspex chirps with readings that confirm the impossible. Atmospheric composition vacuum, biomass negligible, warp signatures dissipated. The garden is gone, eradicated by its own corrupted rhythm. Magos errant Theta 7's voice crackles through Vox, clean of distortion. All 14 secondary signatures extinguished, threat assessment neutralized. The words feel sterile, incapable of conveying the psychic storm just weathered. The emergency beacon activates automatically, broadcasting location to void while I document aftermath with clinical detachment. Victory is complete, but brittle, temporary. The seed's echo lingers like phantom limb remembering rain on poisoned mountains, and I know this was just one network among many. Mortarion's patience spans geological time, and the war against his gardens has only begun. I awaken to absolute silence among the withered remains of what was once a breathing cathedral. My rebreather's emergency seals hissing against hard vacuum, where impossible atmosphere once pressed, with humid insistence. The biomechanical growth has collapsed into grey ash that drifts in zero gravity like funeral snow, coating every surface with powdered dreams of gardens that will never bloom again. My mag boots clank against twisted metal where organic floors once pulsed with 7-beat rhythm, the sound shockingly loud in sudden emptiness that tastes of ozone and extinguished incense. The seed's echo persists in my consciousness like phantom limb. Mortarion's borrowed memories surfacing at random intervals, rain on poisoned mountains, careful hands tending beauty grown from entropy, the seductive logic that made surrender seem like transcendence. I document each intrusion with clinical precision, while my Auspex confirms what visual inspection reveals. Atmospheric composition vacuum, biomass negligible, warp signatures dissipated across 14 facilities. Victory carries weight that makes my shoulders ache with the knowledge of billions saved through sacrifice measured in memories I will never reclaim. Sergeant Hale lies where the facility's collapse left him, vacuum making his final posture neat despite the violence that preceded it. I close, his eyes from habit, and mark his position for recovery teams, throat tight with words that have no place in official reports. Cast's extra lung petals have withered to dun curls fused against his mask, silent as the bells that once rang with each breath. Confessor Matthias breathes shallowly against a twisted bulkhead, his rosarius tangled with pale roots that still twitch occasionally, prayer rope showing knots that weren't there in the transport, small, perfect additions that mark how deeply the corruption reached before sterile mathematics burned it away. I activate my personal log and begin dictating observations for the Ordo Sepulturum, choosing words with surgical care while avoiding details that might contaminate other investigators. The official record will document biological warfare, prevented through application of sanctified countermeasures, but cannot convey the seductive weight of evolution offered as salvation, or the cost of choosing duty over promises that made entropy seem like mercy. Some truths prove too dangerous for documentation, too compelling for minds unprepared to resist their gravitational pull. My emergency beacon pulses against the void's indifference while I catalogue the facility's remains, noting how ash occasionally forms seven-sided patterns when disturbed by air currents from my rebreather. The geometric arrangements suggest memory encoded in molecular structure rather than consciousness, corruption's conceptual framework lingering like radiation in bone despite physical eradication. When I exhale against my faceplate, condensation sometimes beads in configurations that spell barbarous words for patience and endurance, syllables I should not recognize yet understand with chilling clarity. The chronometer displays 72 hours until rescue, time enough to monitor my own consciousness for signs of lingering influence while preparing reports that balance truth with operational security. Outside the facility's corpse, stars show their ancient indifference to human struggles, and I realize this victory represents tactical success rather than strategic resolution. Mortarion's patience operates on geological timescales, and somewhere in the galaxy's darkness, other networks wait with the infinite persistence of entropy itself. The black ship Mortis Tenebrae arrives with funeral solemnity, its scarred hull bearing witness to encounters with threats that exist only in classified files. Decontamination begins before the umbilical seal's complete, blessed unguents washing away molecular traces, while servo skulls conduct atmospheric analysis that makes their machine spirits whimper with mechanical distress. I submit to hexaflame purification and solvent glyph ablution, watching silver tears run across my armor, while knowing that some contaminations penetrate deeper than physical matter, seeding themselves in memory where no amount of sacred oils can reach. Inquisitor Vex Korath conducts the debriefing in a chamber, lined with psychic dampeners, his augmetic eyes shuttering like iris valves with each question. He wears authority the way blades wear edges, never raising his voice when speaking Mortarion's name, but watching my breathing pattern when he recites 7-beat prayers as if they were ordinary litanies. I answer in 8-count rhythm until the itch subsides, exchanging memory for notation, while his stylus scratches against data slate with mechanical precision. The psychological evaluation reveals changes that training cannot explain. Enhanced ability to recognize Nurgle's influence manifesting as physical revulsion to certain geometric patterns and atmospheric compositions. The Medici describe it as adaptive immunity, consciousness developing antibodies against specific heretical thought, but I understand the sharper truth. The seed's echo has made me bilingual in entropy's grammar, able to recognize its promises while understanding their cost in ways that make sleep unwelcome and dreams dangerous. Korath shows me a star map that fills the room like confession made manifest. 14 signatures extinguished as reported, but dozens more flagged by signals I would have missed before. Humidity spikes in vacuum environments, crop yields climbing beyond natural blessing, liturgies revised into septenary scaffolds where no choirs exist. The network I shattered was one among many, each facility a potential plague garden in Mortarion's grand design to transform the galaxy into verdant landscape of guided decay. My new assignment arrives with the weight of necessity. Special Operations Division, with clearance levels that grant access to files darker than most Inquisitors ever see. Agricultural anomalies across 17 worlds require investigation by someone capable of recognizing patterns that hide beneath beneficial mutations. The briefing materials describe agri-world Thessia Minor, where grain harvests have increased 400% overnight, while children sing work songs in 7-word phrases that coordinate planting schedules. Sleep brings dreams of worlds where death wears beauty like sacrament, where the Emperor's light feels sterile compared to the fertile embrace of entropy made theology. I wake tasting rain on poisoned mountains whenever someone recites the litany of pure breath, knowing which panels would learn to breathe, which hymns would make walls pulse with pleased attention. It is not corruption, but fluency, and it isolates more efficiently than any quarantine protocol ever devised by the Ordo Sepulturum's finest minds. The years blur into seasons measured by investigations rather than harvests, each world revealing new variations on ancient themes, while Mortarion's patience operates on geological timescales that make human lifespans seem like brief flames guttering in cosmic wind. I stand now in fields of grain that grow too perfectly under skies that weep at precisely scheduled intervals, my enhanced perception tasting sweetness in the air that makes normal atmospheric readings seem sterile by comparison. The children working these furrows sing in 7-word phrases that coordinate more than planting schedules, their voices carrying harmonics that make soil pulse with pleased attention, despite my auspex registering no anomalies. I have become the Imperium's foremost expert on plague garden identification, traveling from world to world, with knowledge that isolates more effectively than any quarantine protocol. The seed's echo has marked me in ways that make sleep unwelcome and dreams dangerous. Consciousness developing antibodies against heretical thought while becoming fluent in entropy's grammar. I can sense corruption's approach in humidity spikes that make populations grateful for improved air quality, recognize 7-fold patterns hiding beneath beneficial mutations, taste rain on poisoned mountains whenever familiar prayers pulse with organic rhythm. Each victory feels temporary because it is, for every facility destroyed, 2 more appear in distant sectors, their cultivation proceeding with patience that spans centuries rather than seasons. The true horror isn't biological corruption, but spiritual seduction, the way Mortarion's gardens offer false hope to populations ground down by imperial necessity. On worlds where starvation makes children count ribs instead of blessings, promises of abundance through guided transformation carry weight that orthodox doctrine cannot match. Where imperial law demands sacrifice without promising reward beyond death, the pale gardener's gifts guarantee transcendence that makes suffering meaningful. My reports to the Ordo Sepulturum carry warnings that grow more urgent with each passing year. The gardens will return in new forms because they offer something the Imperium cannot provide. I have documented hive worlds where algae vats produce exponential yields while their surfaces shimmer with geometric patterns. Forge worlds where machine spirits hum 7-note hymns of impossible efficiency. Agri-worlds where grain falls in ripples that almost resolve into mandalas before wind breaks the formation. I force the 8 count into my lungs and scatter ash from the cracked censer across stems that hesitate before relaxing into mere plant matter, relieved of responsibilities they had not yet learned. The test proves negative, but I file coordinates anyway, because memory lingers where growth never begins. At night, I watch skies that promise rain at intervals too convenient for natural weather, listening for the phantom bell I have carried since Thesia 7th, bronze grief that no ear but mine accepts as real. The eternal war continues between order and entropy, between stagnation and transformation, between the harsh light of the golden throne and fertile embrace of decay made sacrament. I am eternal guardian against eternal threat, forever watching for sevenfold patterns that indicate corruption blooming in spaces between heartbeats. In the Emperor's name, I tend the garden of humanity's soul, pruning away false promises of easy transcendence, while knowing that somewhere in the galaxy's darkness, other networks wait with infinite persistence of entropy itself.